Welcome back, scientists. Today we are talking about grassland populations and communities. I am Mr. Steier, and this is Mr. Steier's classroom. Your goal today is that you can describe the levels of organisms that make up an ecosystem. So to kick things off, the first question we're asking is, what do you think the word community means? And it's going to mean something different to a lot of us. And what makes up our community? You might be saying it is your family, it's your neighborhood, it's your school, it's your classroom, it is the store down the street, it's your neighborhood. All of those things could be part of your community. Now, when we look here at our image from our book, what we're seeing here is we're working from an individual to a population to a community to an ecosystem. And what do we notice in the number of animals shown in each photo? So we have one, here we have more than one, here we have more than one type of prairie dog and a bison. Here we have more than one prairie dog, more than one bison, and a fox or a coyote. So when we look at these and we're trying to describe the levels of organisms that make up an ecosystem, we're going to move from an individual to a population to a community to an ecosystem. Now, our goal as we read today is to learn how individuals, populations, and communities make up an ecosystem. Many different kinds of organisms or species live in the prairie ecosystem. Scientists classify the organisms in an ecosystem into 3 levels, including organisms, populations, individual organisms, populations, and communities. Individual prairie dogs usually live together in prairie dog towns. A population is all the individuals of a species living together in a particular place. Prairie dogs live in burrows, which they dig in the ground. Other animals, such as burrowing owls and black-footed ferrets, share their burrows. Prairie dogs eat the grasses and wildflowers that live in the prairie. They also serve as food for other animals, such as the black-footed ferrets, foxes, and hawks. All of the populations that live and interact in an area make up a community. Organisms in a community can only survive in environments in which their particular needs are met. Healthy communities have many species connected by a variety of food webs. So, a species is one kind of an organism. A single organism, such as this prairie dog, is an individual in an ecosystem. So, if that's what an individual is, what is a population? All of the prairie dogs that live in a particular part of the ecosystem are a population. So if we have a single organism, that's an individual. If we have all of the same type of thing living in a part of an ecosystem, that is a population. What species is shown in the population here? We just read it in our caption. Yeah, those are prairie dogs. Prairie dogs live in towns like a prairie dog town. You may have seen this. You may remember this from your studies of North Dakota history. A population may include dozens, hundreds, thousands, or even greater numbers of an individual. So, in life science, what does the word community mean? all of the populations of organisms that live and interact in that part of the prairie form a community. A community is all of the different populations that live and interact in an area. So we could have all of the prairie dogs here. We could have all of the squirrels. We could have all of the bison. We could have all of these different groups that are going to be part of this different community. What are some other populations that might be part of this community? The burrowing owls we read about, the black-footed ferrets, the foxes, the hawks, all of those could have their own individual species that make a population that are part of this greater community. And then how are the different species in the community connected together? They're connected by food chains and by food webs, things that we have been studying all year. You may also be thinking, well, they're connected because some of them eat each other, they harm each other, or they steal their homes, their burrows. They live in the places that other animals created for them. And this is all part of a healthy ecosystem. So how is an ecosystem different from a community? Well, in an ecosystem, all of the communities plus the physical parts of the environment that interact together make up the ecosystem. So in an ecosystem, you're talking about all of the living as well as the non-living parts of that environment, which is why we talked about what are the non-living elements in our last lesson. So how is an ecosystem different from a community? An ecosystem includes the physical or non-living parts of the environment as well as the multiple species in that community. Healthy communities have many species connected by a variety of food webs. So how does having many different species make an ecosystem healthy? That is an interesting one for you as a scientist to think about. How does having many different species make an ecosystem healthy? Well, it's just like having a variety or diversity of foods to eat, to make certain that if one part of the food chain were to fall off, there still is a chance for survival for the rest of the population. Interconnected food webs provide animals with a variety of ways to meet their needs. This produces a relatively stable web of life. So, your goal today is that you can describe the levels of organisms that make up an ecosystem. And you will be labeling and identifying an individual, a population, a community, and an ecosystem. Beyond that, you're going to have to think about how is a population and a community different? How is a community and an ecosystem different? What are the elements that make an ecosystem an ecosystem? And as you work forward, you will be able to definitively say as a scientist that you can describe the levels of organisms that make up an ecosystem.